Hey everybody, welcome back to the 42 Days of Magical Practice. We're on day 28 and today's pretty cool because we're gonna actually work a little bit more consciously with our goals that we set up from the beginning.
Right.
I feel like a lot of the past few weeks we've been talking about kind of more generalized topics that are kind of building up our energy and times where we can drop into deeper states. And of course, those are all things that are going to help us to manifest or create what we want. But the next few exercises that we're going to do are really
more directly
nice,
related,
conscious ways of imbibing those things.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially throughout the day.
So important.
Yeah,
Again, from my standpoint, I mean, other techniques work, but I just happen to really find, you get a lot of legs out of that particular technique of imbibing small amounts through the day. I've always felt that anyway.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of cool about it is we're gonna start to work a little bit more consciously with the elements, which is one of those big topics, and you're always saying it's one of those areas that in Western esoteric practice in particular, it's one of those things that has been kind of neglected.
I think to some degrees that it has. I mean, I know some people would agree and some people wouldn't, but I feel that what I've seen and what I've heard from other people, that the elements tend to get sort of a cursory shout out, and then they're sort of bypassed for either greener pastures or things that seem to be more advanced or more technical, maybe more technical, but we live in an elemental world, right? So,
and maybe it would be a good time to just kind of touch on what it is exactly that we mean by the elements.
Sure. Again, in esoteric practice, I mean, we use the pentagram a lot of times, and not everybody, especially if you're not familiar with the actual practice, people don't really understand all the different ideas that constitutes, right? So, but it's a perfectly balanced, diagram. So, and
more specifically, a human being.
A human being, correct.
In a state of perfect balance.
Yeah, human being in a perfect state of balance. So, and each point refers to an element, and they can be shifted around those points, and you can start from any point, obviously. And many times, the pentagram is engaged with a circle, connecting each of the points on the outside, which represents basically the mind of a human being. So to be contained within their mind, and so, and the elements would be from the most dense up, so earth, and then water, then air, and fire, and at the peak would be space, spirit, akasha, whatever term you want to use. Again, using that universal intelligence or God, that idea. And again, the idea, at least from one school, is that upper point would be brought in, so to speak, to that equation only to the degree that the other four are balanced.
The upper point meaning?
The spirit point or God point or whatever it is. Whatever you want to call it at that point. There's five. So it's going to be, and we don't want to, the one thing I would definitely say is that we want to separate it out from sort of that Asian idea of the five elements, because theirs are slightly different, right? They have wood and metal, and it's used for more of, from their idea of the elements. So, to try to overlay that, many people have tried to overlay that, and it's, I don't believe that it's possible, or, it's just two different ideas, and instead of trying to make all these correlations, and again, most of this stuff is contrived anyway, and how you think about it. If you've already done something like that and it's working for you, by all means continue to do it. But I think for some people, if they don't have an idea of either system, just choose one and go with that. And in this case, we're using sort of a Western, hermetic idea of the elements.
And you said that these things are contrived anyway. What do you mean by that?
Well, all comes from within the mind of people, what they witness in their environment, and then the correspondences that they extend to that. regardless of where the information came from initially, whether it was handed down by, either, again, an aspect of this universal intelligence or God, or, from nature itself, spirits in nature, whatever it is. Yeah. We can argue that all day and night.
Where it came from.
Where it came from, right. And who's to say one person's right and one person's wrong? I mean, really, does it have a practical application for you at this point? If it does, then by all means, make it this spaghetti monster in the sky. It doesn't really matter as long as it's working. Again, always coming back to that last part for me is important, the practical aspects.
Well, I think it's tough because it's like, I think we have a bias towards searching for like the system or the truth.
Of course.
I think we're always trying to find something to hang our hat on.
Well, we always try to do that in science as well.
Right.
This is the theory, or this is the practice, or this is the way it's done. And I would agree with that as long as it works consistently. But if it doesn't, then it's up for grabs, and somebody can innovate and make it better. Hopefully, it'll evolve with time as our understanding evolves.
So this Western esoteric system of the 5 elements, what do you think is kind of the foundation of that theory?
Again, just the idea, from a, let's say, I'm not sure where it started, but probably, if we go back, we'd like to say Greece, where it was written down, but obviously it's gone back as far as Egypt and probably even before that. So, but as far as historical reference, we don't have a lot as far as where the actual origin started. But again, the idea is that over time, it's the idea and the theories have evolved. So, and their application has evolved as well. I mean, some people still hold with very traditional ideas about the elements and what their proper use. And again, for me, I'm a little more irreverent than that, and just sort of go by what, here's a starting point for people. And then because I had more of a traditional starting point as well, this is how it worked. And then over time and experience and experimentation, it evolved into something for me that worked well. So I would rather give people just, again, those principles of sort of what the elements represent and how they function, broad views, and then say, here's a suggested use for this or this. And then as time goes on and you glean more experience through practice, then you modify it for your individual taste. Again, we're all fingerprints. So the idea, I think, to hasten that evolution, I think it's important that we work more with principles and less with dogmatic formulas. And really, those people who are doing more and getting success in those doings are the ones that are going to evolve the practices and be able to offer them to more people and help more people out with that.
I want to ask you about another thing that you mentioned before. You were talking about how that 5th point or space or akasha or God or spirit comes in to the degree that the other 4 elements are balanced. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Explain what you mean by that.
Sure. If everything is entrainment, and one thing is, if everything is energy and vibrating at a certain rate, and we think that universal intelligence or God is the vibration of everything, that there's only the one thing, and that if I want to entrain to that as an ultimate goal, it's sort of more of a mystic goal, right? To become one with God or something similar to that idea, then the only way that I could do that would be to balance the other 4 elements in such perfect harmony that they could, that I could entice my my overall vibration to mimic that of God, which would be a vibration that's in perfect harmony and perfect balance with everything.
A lot of times it's hard to know what that is.
Oh, It's always hard to know what that is, unless you're exactly, it's only when you hit it right that you know that you're on target.
So what's our indicator for when obviously if we were in a state of perfect balance and we experienced that unity with God, or
or even glimpses of that,
glimpses of it, I think it would be unmistakable. It'd be obvious, but I think sometimes maybe it's even a little difficult to know, like when we're moving toward that or away from it. What's your indicator for like kind of how that balance of the elements within you, where it's at and how to adjust and things like that?
I think it's a lot of the classic signs, really. I don't think we have to really think of new ones. I've always used some of the ones that have been out there and consistent regardless of what you're practicing. I'm not going to always say that it's a pleasant feeling, but does it feel as if you're losing to some degree a sense of self, but not totally? If you completely integrate with that, there is no you, and so
integrate with
the universal intelligence. If it's a complete integration with that, or as the Buddhists would say, merging with the void. It's like you don't have a physical body to come back to. It's sort of, you've gone past that point. So for me, it's always that idea of feeling, either a satori experience where you feel like you're one with everything, or that unified experience where there's definitely the lines of your personal space or your personal self and that of everything else is definitely skewed. So there is a connection there, although I find for me it's always that bit of sense of, I still know who I am. I do have a persona, and I don't want to lose that. I want to modify it, make it better, but make it more balanced. But it's not my goal to just completely dissolve into the universal intelligence. I like this place, so I want to experience as much of it as possible, and anything to come, as a point of myself. So, but it doesn't mean that we can't have those forays and have those experiences. And of course, they're life altering anytime that happens, right? So those forays into that, or that melding and then coming back, we always come back a little bit more, hopefully a little bit better, or what we would consider better, with a greater understanding of what we're doing here, what we want, how to achieve those things, how to experience this world in a better way. So I find that that's sort of the idea for myself anyway, and if somebody else has a different idea, then that's good for them as well. So I'm not married to the idea of pushing everybody in a certain direction. It's just offering my own reference points, and then seeing if that's if nothing else, it'll just be a jumping off point for them. And then they'll have their own experience, which again, we've said over and over, is much more valuable than my related experiences to them. Their own experiences are of much more value than my related experiences of my own. So, but normally we would have to have a starting off point. So that's and I offer that more than anything else.
Yeah. So how are we going to use the elements to in these specific techniques to entrain to what we want?
Sure. So I'll start in this case with a little bit higher resonance, let's say, just because again, density wise, usually we would start from the most dense and work our way up. And in this case, we're going to work with a lighter density if we want to, or a higher vibrational rate. So air, we start with air because this is all about breathing, which we've gone over, and not the breathing that we did before, where it's just showing how breath work can drop you into state a little bit easier and control a lot of biomarkers in your body as well, right? So everything breathing can help your mind to entrain a certain way, and that has that cascade effect of working into the physical as well. So in this case, the breathing is, holding an idea in your mind. In this case, whatever your desire is that we're going after, what we looked at, what do we want, why do we want it from the beginning? And we've touched on that again a few times.
Definitely.
Want to always keep coming back to that. So the technique itself is relatively easy.
Yeah.
Not even relatively easy, it's easy, okay?
Yeah.
So it's just a little augmentation on the breathing that you're already doing. So consciously breathing. So I'm holding, my end result already achieved in my mind, and I'm breathing that as if I'm projecting it in the air in front of me. So, any breath that you want to do, some people, they don't have to do that. I just learned it like breathing like a pipe, like a whistle without the sound. So sort of breathing it and having it sort of form in that place just in front of me, in the air in front of me, basically. You don't have to visualize, there's nothing like that. It's like you're just holding as strong a representation in your mind as possible, and then just breathing that representation into the air in front of you, and then breathing it back in. And when you breathe it in, you're imagining that excuse me, that idea has sort of glommed onto the physical portions of the air itself. So the molecules, the particle parts, and also the vapor, right? The water part. So that emotional part is, clinging to that and entraining to that idea. And then through my breath, I'm breathing it back in. And as I breathe it in, all of those elements, right? The particles, the solid elements, the water elements, the air elements, the oxygen elements, the fire, all of those, the air works as a medium to transfer that back into my lungs, and then the blood absorbs that and, distributes all of those things into my body. And so if I'm doing this consciously, I've sort of produced from my mind a resonance of that desire already achieved, and then I'm breathing that, and all of those particles are resonating like that, right? And then I'm breathing it back in, and then it's being absorbed by my body, and that resonance is being transferred through my system into the physical. So again, from thought into something that's a little more tangible, if I'm imagining it, right? And then the physical parts achieving that vibration, breathing it in and bringing it into the physical. So again, a way that's sort of this cyclical way of sort of reproducing this vibration within me on a regular basis, because we entrain, our environment is a complete mirror of our subconscious, which is just a certain number of vibrations, right? So all of these things just sort of keep circulating back again. It's the same idea repeated from many different angles to sort of blow it up so that you have different ways of looking at it, but it's always to the same end result. I mean, it's a simple process. I mean, you could do it anywhere, anytime. I mean, you could consciously do it a few breaths, and then, but really, as far as imbibing it through the day, right, you could do that. Like I said, I mean, if I could do it between patients, I'm going, one breath between each patient. I mean, if I do that, I could have 100 breaths of that a day or more, right? So that's the idea. I'm constantly, because it's so simple to do, it's not like you have to go and get something to do this. It's like you're right there. Hopefully you're constantly breathing. So this is just putting a conscious thought into that pattern.
Yeah.
And and bringing it back in. If nothing else, it's just enhancing that idea of reducing the attenuation factor of, you're keeping that resonance going for a longer period of time. So the sustained effect of having that in your mind on a regular basis is increasing the ability for you to increase the end result in a quicker rate. That's all.
Right.
You want to be what the end result is already. And this is just one more way of instilling that in yourself.
And another way to do it is before we started the video, you said that it could easily be combined with like the fourfold breath. So
sure.
If you're sitting down to do that for 5 minutes or something.
Exactly. Take a minute and do this part. Do it at the end when you're already in state. It'll be a little bit easier. You could do it any time in there. If you wanted to do it in the middle and have, the beginning a warm up and then the middle minute and then the 2 minutes at the end to just sort of be in that calmer state at the end, that's fine. Or you could do all 5 minutes of that if you wanted to. It's really up to people to figure that out.
There's not a very rigid structure around the practice.
No.
It's pretty
No,
open.
because for some people this will be, really hard to grasp, and even to think about, how can that be? How can that be possible? I would say, suspend your disbelief for now and just be courageous enough to try it and see what happens. If nothing happens, then we move on to the next. We use the thing, throw it out and use the thing that works for you. Maybe someday you'll have a different understanding and it will work for you then.
Yeah.
Maybe someday not.
Yeah.
And for some people it'll be great, it'll work for them right away. So that's, then that becomes a primary mode for them, and that's fine.
I think a lot of times the thing that kind of can keep us from stopping what we're doing in the middle of the day, even to take like one breath to perform an exercise like this, is kind of maybe this doubt that it's actually going to have an effect or produce something for us or whatever. How effective have you found the practice to be?
Well, I've found it very effective, but for a number of reasons. Not all just in manifesting what I want or creating what I want, right? It's also a great pattern interrupt. So it sort of mixes up my day in a way that constantly keeps my head in the game. Let's put it that way. I mean, taking a minute to do conscious breathing is not going to interrupt the main flow of what I'm doing there for work.
Right.
But it's enough to keep my head in this work as well.
Within your practice.
Within my practice,
Rooted
right?
within your practice.
Exactly. So
yeah.
It sort of really sort of helps it to flow together. So in that respect alone, I think that that's really valuable because it keeps you in a more open state on a regular basis. I find that since I've done that really regularly, I can really keep an open mind and entrain to the people that I see on a regular basis, and I'm always looking for those clues to help them, and to always look at even conditions that seem to not change much, to get new out.
Your more difficult patients, you would say.
Or just to get a new outlook on it every time. You're going in with fresh eyes each and every time because you're constantly in that state of openness. Let's put it that way. And so I think that that's really valuable.
And do you think that the openness in your attitude or your state has to do with just having that kind of pattern interrupt in the middle of your day, or do you think it also actually has to do with the conscious breathing specifically?
I think it's a little bit of both. It would be hard for me to define a percentage of, what it is for this, is it that. Yeah. I think it all works together in the end.
Just curious.
Yeah, I think it's just part of my pattern of flow through the day, or it has become that. And I switch it up. It's not the same every day. So it's not like, now it becomes my routine that, it's like this set pattern. And for me, the pattern interrupt is really important. Again, when it becomes something that I'm not doing consciously, if I don't have to think about it anymore, it's become a habit of the body. The body mind is actually just doing it, just repeating it without thought. And I don't want that. So I want to be involved with that all the time.
Involved with what?
Any thought process. Anything my body's doing, the body should be the mind should be in complete control of the body. So it should just be your vessel that you're directing around from one thing to the next and doing whatever you want, basically. So, but your mind has to control that. And so the only way to really stay hyper aware is to keep everything fresh and new all the time. Because it's like a child, right? You don't want to miss anything. I don't want to go to bed because I don't want to miss anything, right? It's not because I'm not tired. They're always tired, but it's like, and it's good that they go to bed at a certain time, right? But the idea is that why don't they want to? They don't want to miss anything. So I don't want to miss anything either. So, that means I have to constantly switch things up to keep my awareness at a peak level. And so this is one great way to do that. But, if it becomes too routine, sort of like, you brought up the Castaneda books the other day. This is sort of tapping on that idea of erasing personal history, but not from this idea of, okay, I don't have any friends and I don't have any family and I've changed my name and I do. Those are sort of literal equivalents of that. But erasing personal history is just not having any habitual patterns of anything, and it keeps you awake and aware. It constantly keeps you in this flexible thinking. And if you're in that zone all the time, I mean, I just find that that's a much better way to go through life, because you're constantly aware of what's going on because you don't know what's coming next. So even a good habit is still a habit. It can turn into something else, and it just becomes another area that you can become unconscious. So, I mean, you read the stories, you hear the stories, you hear it from other people, but do we really understand? We just think it's some kind of weird. I mean, I've heard, this is what I've heard from other people anyway. And I've had the thoughts myself, it's like, oh, this guy practices magic, this guy practices shamanism, this guy is whatever. And they just have these, as they get older, they have these weird, eclectic kind of patterns, that of having no patterns. They laugh when other people, now, are they just really bonkers, for lack of a better way of saying it, or is it some kind of crafty way of erasing personal history, of not having habitual patterns so that they can constantly keep everything fresh? I mean, obviously, you don't want to go around and do it so that you're just acting weird for no reason other than you're acting weird, but you need to be able to function in every role in life that you choose to, and function well, in my opinion. But I think that a lot of these sort of eclectic habits are really, or they're not even habits, they're just, mannerisms are just a way to sort of keep everything fresh all the time. There's nothing that's really set in stone, and it keeps them alert and awake all the time.
I could probably ask you more about that, and we could make a 2-hour video. I'm actually certain of it. I know we could do that, but in lieu of that, can you think of any other examples that people might read if they what are some characters that you can think of, whether from film or books or whatever, that represent that ideal to you?
I mean, if I were going really almost in the crazy zone, it would probably be not Gandalf, but Radagast. Like from the Hobbit, right? Because I mean, even the other wizards think he's a little off his rocker, right?
And he's the wizard with the animals.
Yeah, with the animals, right? Living in the forest and the crazy hat and the bird nest under his hat. That's sort of that extreme version of that sort of talking to himself, talking to the animals, doing this, doing that. Great at what he does. Obviously, gets fantastic results, but he's a little out there,
right?
And so, but really, as far as being alert and aware all the time, he's that. And as far as the view from the film or the books go, and I'm trying to think of others that would be in that zone. Obviously, the Castaneda books are in that zone. I was always trying to find out where Don Juan was, and he wasn't ever in the place where he was supposed to be, and he wasn't ever doing what he was supposed to be, or what he considered he was supposed to be doing. Or
I think it's always like, he always just seems so, the way that Castaneda writes about Don Juan is he always seems very unpredictable. Yeah. It's like he's always doing the opposite of what he thinks he's going to do, or how he's going to interact with people, or something like that, And not to the point where he was like a Looney Tune, but just that,
right.
It's funny because as he kept himself on his toes, it kind of makes everybody else on their toes too, because it's kind of like, what's going to happen next?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. I mean, again, like you said, it's not always something that's inappropriate or whatever it is. It's just, it's unpredictable.
Not in a set pattern.
It's unpredictable. You're not predicting the next move. You're just using the principles, understanding what's going on from your point of reference, and finding your flow and maneuvering through that incident or that adventure or whatever it is that's going on. So however you engage it. So, and I think that, remember that he's not describing his own, Castaneda is describing his interpretation of, Don Juan's persona.
Right.
So, we don't really know what was going on in Don Juan's head at the time. I mean, he sort of alludes to it here and there, but we don't have a, POV from his perspective, right?
Right.
So, but looking at it from that standpoint of erasing personal history, I would say that that's a more, a better understanding or initiatic understanding of that idea. That it's not just about getting rid of everybody in your life. It's literally about, changing up your routines and doing this and doing that throughout the day, not just because it keeps you more awake and alert and engages life new every day. Nice. As soon as it becomes boring, it's like, what's the point?
What's the point?
What's the point? Yeah. Exactly. So
cool. Yeah. Well, I think we touched on a lot of good stuff today, and definitely have a practice to try out, give a go.
So does everybody.
What's that?
So does everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get some stuff to do and think about, and write some comments back, and try the breathing practice, because it really is one of the most simple things and to do on the fly.
Right.
You don't need anything, and you have to breathe anyway, hopefully. So, unless you're a zombie, it's probably going to work for you.
Right.
So
yeah. And if you're a zombie, you're all set.
You're all set. Yeah. You're already there.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys. That's it for today, and we'll see you tomorrow.